And now, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our presenter for the morning, please welcome Jim Cathcart.
Junior. Good morning. I've known your next speaker all my life, and I can confidently say that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. Jim Cathcart joined NSA in 1976. He served 10 years on the board of directors, chaired convention and workshops, and served as president in 1988 and 89. He's authored 7 books, 14 cassette albums, and over 70 videos. Folks, he eats, drinks, and breathes human development. I know. I've seen him struggling to build a career, and I've seen him at the top of his profession. And no matter where he is at any given time, he is constantly thinking and rethinking himself. But I'll let him explain that part. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dad.
Good morning. Boy, it's great to be back in this room again. Last time I was here was 1989, and I was president of NSA. You got an even better one this year. How many of you believe that you could significantly increase your level of success and personal satisfaction? Well, if you really would like to, then come with me and let's discover how much more successful you could be.
It was 1972, Little Rock, Arkansas. I worked at the Housing Authority as a government clerk for $525 a month. I was overweight and out of shape with a career that was going nowhere. Then one day, I heard this voice on the radio.
In order to become a professional in a world of amateurs, we need to study 3 important subjects. 1, our company and the industry in which it operates. 2, our job and perhaps the next step upward in our career. And 3, we need to study people, since successfully serving and getting along with people will determine our success or failure. And it can be accomplished in an hour a day, devoted to reading and making permanent notes. Studying 1 book or 1 article at a time, an hour each day, will lead to your becoming an expert at your particular job and industry in 5 years or less.
5 years or less? How many of you recognize that voice? Earl Nightingale. When I heard Earl Nightingale that day, it started a process within me that literally changed the direction of my life. I started rethinking who I was. I started thinking about the things I had done. I was considering what he had said. 1 hour a day in study in your field, and you're a national expert in 5 years or less. 5 years or less? I was a government clerk for the Little Rock Housing Authority. I had 8 hours a day. I could do it by Thursday. I started thinking, wait a minute, what do I want to do? 5 years, hour a day, what do I want to study? I thought about it for weeks. I mean, literally weeks on end, and I was writing notes every day and kind of daydreaming, brainstorming. Finally, it occurred to me that what I most wanted to do was what Nightingale was doing. I wanted to help people grow. But how? I mean, NSA didn't exist. This was 1972, for heaven's sakes. I mean, Zig was still learning technique. And Anthony Robbins was 12 years old. I really feel great today thinking about that. Oh, here's what I looked like in 1972. You believe that? The nice-looking babe, huh? That's my wife, Paula. She looks about like that today. I have changed a bit. Would you agree? That was the day I tipped the scales at about 200 pounds. Whew. Things are a little bit different. Years later, I was speaking. I went on the circuit. I was up in Chicago one day, and I was speaking for an outfit called Tidy Car, auto appearance specialty outfit. The speaker they had had the month before was a new young speaker, foreigner, named Nito Kubain. And he'd done okay, but they were looking to upgrade. And so I came in, and I was speaking to the group that day, and my message was, if you will just figure out the kind of person you want to be, and then every day ask yourself one simple question, then you can become more of that person you're capable of. And the question was this: how would the person I'd like to be do the things I'm about to do? I mean, you think about it just before you give a speech. How would the kind of person I'd like to be, the kind of speaker I'd like to be, the part of me that I admire, how would that person deliver this speech? How would that person return phone calls, keep records, all the things like that? So I told the audience that. At the end of my speech, a young guy came up who was 19 years old. White hair, white eyebrows, what in the South we call towhead, He came up, his name was Tim Seward, S-E-W-A-R-D. He said, Mr. Cathcart, can I speak with you? This was 79 or so. I was a young guy. I was impressed that he said Mr. Cathcart. And I said, sure. And we sat down at lunch and talked, and he asked question after question. And I could tell he was really eager to grow, and I figured he really would. So I shared as many ideas as I could. And then I figured I'd never see him again. Well, later that year, I got another call from Tidy Car. And they said, Jim, would you come and MC the banquet and deliver a workshop at our annual convention in New Orleans? I said, sure. So I went down there and did that. And on the evening of the big banquet, we were in a huge room like this, and everything was elegantly set with candles on the table and all this sort of stuff, and music playing in the background. Over on the left on a pedestal was a Corvette, a white Corvette automobile. Brilliant car sitting there glistening in the spotlight. After I turned the microphone over to the president of the company, Gary Goranson, he said, ladies and gentlemen, you know the competition has been tough this year, but I don't think you know the numbers because we've kept those pretty secret. The tough competition, just to illustrate, the person in position number 2 was ahead of the one in position number 3 by only 2 points. Number 3 led number 4 by only 1 point, and it went like that for several more down the scale. But the person in position number 1, the international sales leader who wins the Corvette, won this contest with 300% more than the person in position number 2. The audience was awed by that, but they knew who it would be. He said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me your international award winner from Bay City, Michigan, Tim Seward. Place went insane. Tim jumped up and screamed. Everybody else started jumping up, hugging each other. A few people took advantage of that. And it was just going bonkers in there. They lifted Tim up on their shoulders and brought him to the front of the room, and he started fondling his Corvette as much as you can do that to a car. I made my way through the crowd of congratulations, and I got over to him and I said, Tim, great job. We got a big bear hug going. And I said, how in the world did you do it? He said, Jim, I just followed what you taught me. I said, what did I teach? He said, how would the person I'd like to... I said, oh, yeah, that. Like I remembered at the time. I said, well, how did you do it? He said, well, I went home and I thought about it. I mean, I was a new kid in the business. I didn't know how to do this. I thought, now, I'd like to be the international sales leader. How would he do what I'm about to do? So I started organizing my business better. I started being more professional, dressing a little bit better, taking care of people and myself better. And things just got better. And I started winning, at the quarterly awards and so forth. And then I knew I was in the running for the big one. Came time to go to New Orleans from Michigan. I said, how would the international award winner go to New Orleans? Well, Jim, I figured he'd go first class. One way. I said, come on. I said, you bought a first-class, one-way ticket to New Orleans and you didn't know you had won? He said, I'm going to need a ride home. Yeah, good for Tim. I said, good point. Well, ever since, I've been thinking about that, for years since then, because that's such a dramatic example of applying some of the things that you and I talk about when we talk with people. And I thought, just a simple question, how would the person I'd like to be do the thing I'm about to do? Now, I don't recommend to audiences that they go out and buy a one-way ticket to somewhere expecting to win their way back, although I've seen some sales contests based on that. But I kept thinking in my own life back in the early 70s, how would the person I'd like to be do the things I want to do? And I thought about that hour-a-day thing that Nightingale had talked about. Spending just 1 hour a day in study in your chosen field. 5 years later, you're a national expert. Years later, I was speaking in Dallas, coincidentally. I was speaking for the American Heart Association, a youth group. And there was a young woman in the audience, about 15 years old, who was an Olympic gymnast. And I was impressed with her. And at the end of my speech or seminar, she said, Mr. Cathcart, could I ask a question? I said, sure. She said, what was the hardest thing for you in getting from where you used to be to where you are today? Well, I got to tell you, I was complimented just by the question. To where I am today? I'll tell you, child. No, I said, honestly, the toughest thing for me in getting from where I used to be to where I am today was believing I could do it. How many of you can identify with that? Yeah. Believing I could do it. The guy you saw on the slide a minute ago, he was quite a different guy than who I am today. I believe today's choices select the challenges we get to deal with tomorrow. I believe the way you think today about yourself creates the space in which your tomorrows will grow. I also believe the world is ready to give you everything you're ready for. Now, when this really came around for me, when I really figured it out, was back when I was president. Now, if you'll remember, those of you that were members in 1989, my theme for 88 and 89 was share the vision. Now, what I had in mind for that was nudging people, because I felt like we were grossly underestimating ourselves. As individuals, we were underestimating ourselves. As an organization, we were underestimating ourselves. So when I came out of that corner in 1989 in smoke and mirrors with the Back to the Future thing and everything, I said, I've just returned from your future, and I can tell you, you're going to love it. Well, do you? Yeah. Isn't it? Boy, it's unfolding wonderfully. Well, what I tried to do with the Share the Vision mission or message was to just give people paintings or examples of what the futures could be, so that we'd start creating those on our own. And one of the things I recognized is if you want to improve the future, you got to improve the people. I saw an ad you're going to love. This was a Pioneer Electronics ad. It said, you can't improve the system until you improve the speakers. I couldn't have said it better myself. In 1989, when I was president of NSA, I got on a plane at DFW Airport. As the door was closing before takeoff, a guy came dashing onto the plane and sat down next to me. It turned out to be Jim Wright. Jim Wright at the time was Speaker of the House. And after we got airborne, I said, good morning. He said, how are you? I'm Jim Wright. I said, I'm Jim Cathcart. And this is a big coincidence. He said, it is? I said, yeah, you're the Speaker. He said, yeah. I said, I'm the president of them. He said, beg your pardon? I said, I'm the president of the National Speakers Association. He said, tell me about that outfit. So I told him about NSA. He said, how many people in it? It was about what we have today, about 3,300 people. And he said, well, how many of those regularly speak? And I said, well, a little more than half, maybe 2/3, something like that. He said, how many speeches do they give? And I told him, how many audience members? He said, that's a pretty influential organization. Now, here was one of, at the time, the most influential politicians in the world saying to me, that's a pretty influential organization. So I started thinking about us. You know, if we look at the number of speakers in NSA, and we multiply that times the number of speeches we give, times the number of members of our audience and the number of hours we speak to them, we will get the total amount of influence we exert. Walk through the numbers with me. 3,300 members. Let's be conservative. Let's say only half speak. All right? 1,650 people. Only half of them speak. And let's say that they only speak once a week, never any more frequently than that. That's 50 speeches a year if they take a vacation. Now let's assume further that the biggest audience they ever address is only 100 people. Would you say these are conservative numbers? Okay. 1,650 speakers times 50 speeches a year times 100 audience members, and let's assume it's only 1 hour each time, never longer than that. I don't know how fast you are with math, but I'll save you the effort. 8,250,000 hours of personal influence a year. The people you're going to see up here in a second are the people exerting that. 8,250,000 person hours of direct face-to-face influence per year. Do you think I inflated the numbers? No. If anything, I underestimated, right? And those people, can you see it? Yeah. Those people are the ones who are bringing about that influence. You are. 8 million. What if, for 1 year, we agreed on something? Whew! Could we change the world or what? Right? I think we ought to take the Judy Tenuta approach to life. It could happen. Right? Hey, 8 million hours of personal... Who do we influence, by the way? And I'm not inflating this by counting the same people twice. We're talking about 8,250,000 separate people for at least 1 hour in a public address forum, the most influential forum known to man, done by communicators who are articulate in what they do. And they're doing this annually to whom? The truck drivers? The waiters? The people that work in the stock department? Or the salespeople, the supervisors, the managers, the leaders, the owners? We're exerting that amount of influence annually on the leaders of our country, our countries. And those people are making new decisions based on our speech that influence the lives of other people. The more you and I can find areas in which we agree, the more potential influence we will have on the world. Pretty awesome stuff, isn't it? We are a powerful organization. You are a powerful individual. An individual speaker, just with those conservative numbers, is exerting annually over 5,000 hours of personal influence. What kind of footprints are you leaving on the world? Yeah, pretty important stuff. Purpose times mastery equals fulfillment. See, I believe that who we are and how abundant our life is going to depend to a huge extent on the purpose in our life, the sense of meaning that we put into it. And then that's going to be multiplied by the mastery that we achieve. The purpose of life, if you think of it, though, is to live fully, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Any living thing, what's it trying to do? It's trying to live more fully. Look at a plant, look at an animal, look at a person. What are they trying to do? They're trying to live, as they said in the Bible, abundantly. The purpose of life is to live. Really live. We're capable of more than we think we are. Purpose times mastery equals fulfillment. If you've got a lot of purpose but not much mastery, you tend to just be a philosopher and you don't do much in the world. If you've got a lot of mastery but not much purpose, you tend to be a workaholic, and that's not very fulfilling either. So here's how the formula works out. If you want a lot of fulfillment, if you want to live abundantly, I'll give you the Jim Cathcart formula for that. I believe success comes from being authentic, being yourself. And if you take authenticity and add to that good choices, meaning that you've aligned your life so that it's a natural fit for who you are, authenticity plus alignment is multiplied by purpose and generates abundance. If your life could be more abundant and you'd like to make it be that way, think about that formula. You don't find your successes in the cosmos, you find them in your simple day-to-day choices. Just the little things that you do every day, the little choices that you make. A few years ago, I spoke in Atlanta. I was speaking to a split general session. That was the biggest forum I'd had on my own material for quite some time. And back in those days, I was talking about the acorn principle, at the early stages of it. The acorn principle that says your greatest, fastest, and easiest growth always comes from your natural abilities grew out of about 4 years of research I did. Now, my career path has been this. I started out teaching what I called helping people grow, motivational stuff. And then I went into the field of behavioral styles, personality types. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I went through a series of research exercises over about a 4 or 5 year period that resulted in what I'm doing today that I call Rethinking Ourselves. So today's talk is sort of an update on the things that I was reporting to you in the early stages back a few years ago in Atlanta. And the acorn principle comes from this. If you start with an acorn, what will you end up with? Okay, an oak tree. Very specific kind of tree. But you know what a lot of people do? They look in that mirror at themselves, at that acorn, or they look at their child that they're trying to raise, the acorn, or their employee or coworker or colleague, the acorn they're trying to grow, and they say, "Acorn, I believe you've got potential. By golly, acorn, I think you could be a great one. I believe you could be a giant redwood." Tell you what I'm going to do for you, acorn. I'm going to work with you personally. I'm going to be your mentor. Write that down. You'll be my protege, and I'm going to teach you to be a giant redwood. Here's a tape I want you to listen to. This is from Dr. Norman Vincent Tree. It's called The Power of Redwood Thinking. Okay? You listen to that, it'll change your life. All right? Now, here's a biography that's written by some NSA member that tells about great redwoods. All right? I want you to listen or read through that and listen to your own thoughts. Think about what you could do to be more like the redwoods that you read about in there. And if you would also just start doing what we call networking. Ann Bo can tell you about that. Just hang out with redwoods. All right? Take a redwood to lunch. Just be around them, notice their patterns and stuff like that. And what will happen is you'll be more of a redwood. By the way, there's another thing, there's a technique that us speakers use. We call it affirmations, okay? I've written an affirmation for you. You just talk redwood talk, okay? Here, read with me. I am a redwood, great and tall. My mighty branches shelter all. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people like me. What's it going to be when it grows up? But a really insecure oak. Because it just got the message, doggone, you weren't supposed to be an oak. You should have been a redwood. Can it be a redwood? Not even close. Can't even do a good fake redwood, right? But it could knock your socks off and impress you if you expected it to be an oak. So if you were to give it tapes on oak skills, if you were to say, Acorn, I've noticed you got a knack for oak. Let me work with you on that. Here's some books that tell about other oaks that have been successful. Here's a tape on it. Here's some affirmations. Here's, whatever. When it grows up, it'll impress the socks off of you. Okay? But only if you expect it to be what it already is. Your greatest, your fastest, and your easiest growth always comes along the lines of your natural abilities. Always. So what kind of seed is in you? I'll show you some ways to find out. By the way, a little footnote. A while ago, I was talking about Earl Nightingale. For a few years, Tony Alessandra and I were partners, and we had an office down near the beach in La Jolla, California. This was about 1983. I was sitting there one day listening to telephone ring and other things go on in the office and just working on a little project. And I heard the phone ring. I reached over and I picked it up. And I heard this voice, deep, mellow voice, say, "May I speak to Jim Cathcart?" And I said, "This is Jim Cathcart." He said, "This is Earl Nightingale." It's the guy. I didn't know whether to just sit back and listen to him like I'd always done before or whether to interact. Honest to gosh, it was Earl Nightingale himself. He said, "Mr. Cathcart, I've read an article you wrote that was published in the Nonprofit World Report." I said, "Yes." He said, "I think that would make a good tape album." I said, it is a tape album, sir." And he said, "Would you send me a copy? I'd like to listen to it because my company publishes tape albums." I said, "Trust me, I know." What happened was, years before, when I was sitting there thinking about how I could do what Earl Nightingale did, I didn't have a clue there was such a thing as being a professional speaker as we know it today. So I just started going to seminars, reading books, and just trying to figure out what the acorn was in me so that I could start growing, as much as I was capable of growing, and be somehow doing what Nightingale was doing. Well, a few years later, just a couple, I started working for Nightingale Conant Corporation, selling Earl's tapes. So everything went fine, and things evolved over the years. I ended up getting into speaking, and then I started having products published around the country and around the world, and that was pretty good. And then I got to San Diego, and then the next thing I know, Nightingale Conant started publishing my album that I did with Tony, which was called Relationship Strategies. In 1974, I was selling Earl Nightingale's tapes. And in 1984, he was selling mine. Yes! Quid pro quo. They've sold over $3.5 million worth of that album. Things really do work in the world when we go along with these things that we know to be true. See, that didn't come about because I had any phenomenal skill. The person that you saw in that fat photo a while ago, he didn't have much potential. He didn't have anything going for him. And I knew I was not going to be a very significant person unless I did something personally to make me more significant in the world. And I had to find out from the world what those things would be. Peter Drucker told Bill Moyers. Bill was asking him, "What would you tell kids as they're getting ready to enter the 21st century?" He said, "Know your strength. That's the most important thing. Know what you're good at." See, to know your strength, I believe that what we've got to do is we've got to know the person that goes beyond our usual thinking. Like Einstein's quote here, "The significant problems we face can't be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them." Yeah, we created them. You think about it, our circumstances today are almost always the predictable result of our thinking yesterday. Isn't that true? This would be a yes response, right? Okay. It is, isn't it? Marcel Proust said, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but having new eyes." See, the ancient Christians called that metanoia. It meant to transcend your own thinking. It was a fundamental shift in how you thought about things. And what happened to me the day I heard Earl on the radio was I had a fundamental shift of mind. I started thinking about things in new and different ways. I believe we need to know, though, more than just our behavior patterns. We need to know the person behind it. See, our behavior is the tip of the iceberg, and if you don't understand that part of it, then you're kind of handicapped in understanding people. But in addition to that, we need to know how we think about things, our attitude, our point of view. We need to know the values that are most important to us, not just the ones we were taught, but the ones we were born with, the things we deeply care about. We need to know about our drive, our energy patterns, our background, the way it colored us, colored the way we approach life, and our thinking style. Well, that could be pretty complex. So let me just simplify that by giving you a easier and quicker way to look at it. Know three things. Know what kind of intellect you have. Know what kind of values motivate your deepest decisions. And know what your velocity is. So you need to know your smarts, you need to understand your heart, and you need to know your speed or intensity of motivation. Now, in our society, there's been a great deal of intellectual prejudice. So to put the whole thing of intellect into a new context, I'd like you to watch with me a clip from Peter Jennings of ABC Evening News.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight.
Finally here this evening, the American agenda and why it is so stupid to think there is only one way to be judged smart. Consider this. In the 1800s, the popular belief was that you could tell how smart a person was by counting the bumps on his head. It does sound pretty foolish today, but maybe no less foolish than thinking you can measure a person's intelligence with just an IQ test. Some food for real thought on tonight's American agenda. Here's ABC's Bill Blakemore.
This person is indescribably busy, thinking, using his intelligence. But so is this person, using intelligence. And so is he. And so is she. All using different kinds of intelligence. The old idea that intelligence is a single quantity that you can measure with a single number, like an IQ score, putting everyone somewhere on the same line from smart to dumb, is giving way. Instead, say researchers, everyone has many different intelligences, and each person has them in a different combination. So we're each as different from each other in intelligence as in fingerprints, only much more so. Dr. Stephen J. Gould.
What you usually find is that some people are very good in some things and not so good in others, and that the term smart or dumb could really only apply to these individual abilities and not to the entire personality.
Individual abilities like interpersonal intelligence, the ability to understand other people's moods and concerns. Introspective intelligence, the ability to understand yourself, your own feelings. Spatial intelligence, the knack of visualizing shapes or location in 3 moving dimensions. Bodily intelligence, when muscles have their own memory and meanings. Musical intelligence, thinking in sounds in their infinite variety. Verbal intelligence, the ability to use words, spoken, written, or just heard. Logical or mathematical intelligence, numbers, symbols, abstract relations. These last two, verbal and logical or mathematical intelligence, are often the only ones valued by traditional schools, not broad enough a preparation for a world which requires many abilities. That's according to psychologist Howard Gardner, the man who developed this division of intelligence into 7 parts. He says we've been testing too narrowly.
We looked at people's ability to answer some questions, recite numbers backwards, move a few puzzle pieces around, and say, this is your net intellectual worth. And that's just crazy.
Here's your first test item. Begin.
Giving you a much broader idea of what you might be good at is the aim of tests at the Johnson O'Connor Institute. They claim they can measure 18 separate aptitudes or intelligences, all inborn, they believe, or developed in early childhood.
Yes, that's correct.
The aptitudes determine the directions that you'll get satisfaction from. The more you use of your natural talents, the happier we think you'll be.
And they believe when your natural aptitudes are not used...
Think about that for a second. What they've said shifts the question we think with. Kind of like shifting the question to how would the person you'd like to do or like to be do the thing you're about to do. They shift the question from how smart are you to how are you smart. It's a whole new look on things. How many saw the movie Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman? Yeah. Remember Dustin Hoffman's character Raymond was autistic savant, meaning on one level he was a genius, on another level he was an idiot, literally, technically. If someone asked how smart is he, you'd have to come up with 2 answers. But what if we asked of him, how is he smart? That fast, you could tell me, mathematically. Then you can start making choices that align the life to be a better fit for the person, which results in abundant living. See, we need to understand our smarts, but we also need to understand our hearts. Because the heart is what ought to be doing the leading. The head is good at guiding and managing, but the heart is where the inspiration comes from. Lead with your heart, guide with your head, because the heart, well, the head will tell you what to do and how to do it, but the heart will tell you why. And a why always overrules a how. Always. I have a friend, Bruce Belland. Bruce Belland is a musician, a singer. He founded a group called the Four Preps. You remember the Four Preps? Well, they're back on the road today, and they're even better than they used to be. They've got the lead singer of the Diamonds and the lead singer of the Association with them, and they're doing the hits from all those groups, over 40 top records. Well, Bruce and I were talking about this one day, and he said, Jim, you know, I've got an example for you on this heart thing. And I said, what is it? He said, well, when my second daughter was born, Melissa, my wife had to have an emergency cesarean section. Now, the doctor who did the delivery did a fine job, but prior to that delivery, I'd been talking with him one day and told him about my music. And he said, you know, Bruce, I wish I'd been a musician. Instead of a doctor, I'd like to have been a concert pianist. Well, that day, my wife had the emergency cesarean section. She came through fine. My daughter came through fine. And the doctor came out to tell me the good news, and I was standing there talking with him. And a colleague of his walked up, said, excuse me, doctor. He said, yes. He said, sir, I just want you to know you performed brilliantly in there, and it's an honor to have assisted you. He said, thank you very much. The guy left. Bruce turned to the doctor. He said, hey, now tell the truth. You just brought a new life into the world. You saved another life. You had a colleague tell you it is an honor to have been in your presence, for heaven's sakes. Can you honestly say you wish you'd been a musician? Doctor said, I was pretty good in there. He said, you know why? Because this morning I got up early, and for 1 hour I played Chopin. When you make time for what you love to do, it overflows into all the rest of your life, and everything else gets better. Well, thank you, Jim. You expected something else at this convention? I could just sit around making music all day long. Long as I got my music, ain't gonna do nobody no wrong. And who knows, I might come up with a song, and people might stop all their fussing and fighting just long enough to sing along. I believe in music. I believe in love. I believe in music. I believe in peace and love. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to hold it in my arms and keep it company. I'd like to see the world for once all standing hand in hand, and hear it echo through the hills for peace throughout the land. Because I believe in music. I believe in love. I believe in music. I I just did that for me. Oh, let me wrap this together. There's one more thing I want us to think about. Let's think about our smarts, and let's think about our hearts, and let's think about our velocity. Velocity is the intensity with which you live. The intensity or the motivational drive that you bring to what you do, what you go after, what you care about, and so forth. I mean, think about it. If you think about a metronome on a piano, it sits there and keeps time to the music. Some people's metronome just goes like that, you know, just rip, 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 right? Okay? Other people's metronome goes at a more reasonable pace, you know, kind of a regular 8-hour day kind of a pace. And then some people's metronome will just go, nah. You know? I guess one end of it is a AAA hyper-motivated superachiever, and the other one is a comatose couch potato, right? Well, most of us are somewhere in between. And if you understand your velocity, you can make choices so that you align your life in a way that the way you pursue what you care about in your heart and the way you use the intelligence that you have brings about abundant living for you. And it doesn't burn you out. See, if you put this on a scale, it looks something like this. Let me get past that just a second. There you go. Goal at the top, you at the bottom, starting point, okay? And what determines how much time it takes you to get from that starting point to the goal is your angle of velocity. If your angle's really intense and you work and play and sleep all at high intensity, then you get there quicker. If it's moderate, it takes a little longer, and if it's not so intense, it takes you even longer to get there. Neither one of those is best. That's just the way people are, different levels of velocity. I love the way Ron Willingham illustrated this one time. He told me that he had seen a cartoon that I've since found, and it shows a snail on the back of a turtle, and the snail's going, whee! I get tickled when I tell that one. But think about your velocity. How do you go after things? You know, are you the type that just works and sleeps and plays at a very full clip, you know, kind of full throttle, flat out? Are you the kind that can get by on very few hours sleep? A normal work day for you is a day of 12 or 14 or more hours? And you find that even in your spare time, your relaxation is spent working on some kind of a project? That's high achiever. And those are the kind of people that our society tends to reinforce the most. Would you agree? Okay. But a lot of times you and I tend to go in and deliver a message that puts a little too much encouragement on everybody trying to be that type of achiever. If you're moderate in your angle of velocity and you try to go at a major intense clip, what happens is you experience regular periods of burnout and anxiety. If, on the other hand, you don't push yourself hard enough or encourage yourself urgently enough to get into your natural zone of velocity, what happens below that is boredom and ultimately depression. So the key is to stay, as they say, within the zone. Bob Kriegel, a member here, calls it the C zone. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, write that one down, calls it flow. Robert Horton of the Carefree Institute calls it angle of attack. I call it your velocity, okay? Your angle of velocity. What is yours? Is it intense? Is it moderate? Is it kind of laid back? See, if you make choices that are right for your natural velocity, then the way you use your natural smarts and the way you follow what you care about deepest brings about a great deal of fulfillment for you. Now, in my family, we very conveniently have a perfect separation of the three velocities. I'm high velocity. My wife Paula is moderate velocity. Jim Jr. has lower velocity. Not low, just lower. And being of high velocity and noticing that Jim was not quite as self-motivated as me in the earlier part of his life, I decided the boy needed repair. So I figured I would be the one to fix him. So I was the self-appointed son fixer. And the way I did it, now I did it as an enlightened speaker, knowing about, motives have to come from the inside. Motivation stimulates it from without, okay? So I started lurking, watching for a motive, And I'd see him express interest in something, and I'd pounce on it. And I'd start coming up with some kind of a program for it. Well, one day he came to me, and this was years ago. He came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, you played the guitar in cocktail lounges when you and Mom got married. Would you teach me to play the guitar?" I said, "Yes." And so I immediately gave him my spare guitar, said, "Play this and do this with your fingers until they bleed, and then rest a day and we'll do it again. Okay? Here's some people I want you to meet. Here's some songs I want you to practice, all right? And I've set you up for a couple of..." Basically, I laid out a 3-year plan. Truth. Guess how long it took him to lose interest in guitar? About 10 days. And I thought, well, you know, wrong motive. I didn't find a button. That's what it was. So I kind of gave up on that, and I'd started looking for another motive. And I'd watch, and every time he'd express interest in something, I'd come up with an elaborate plan, which immediately overwhelmed him and killed the motive again. Well, after a while, he eased up. He said, "You know, just expressing interest in front of Dad, he wouldn't do this stuff." Well, he did. He stopped expressing interest in things around me. One day he went to Paula. He said, "Mom, would you answer this question?" She said, "Ask your dad." He said, "Mom, I don't want to know that much." Oops. Well, finally I wised up. I was doing some study and I started understanding the concept of velocity. And as I understood it better, I started to realize that I'd been overwhelming him. And when I stopped trying to fix him, he immediately became more effective. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it is, isn't it? When I stopped trying to fix him, he picked up the guitar. A friend of his was a little more enlightened than I. And he said, "You want me to teach you how to play your favorite song?" Jim said, "Yeah." Started playing his favorite song, practiced about 2 hours a day until he got it down. Today, he still practices about 2 hours a day. He can sit in front of a stereo and play along with the music. When I was doing it for a living, I couldn't do that. Did his velocity increase? I don't think so. See, what happened with Jim Jr. was he started seeing a way that playing the guitar could be fun. When it didn't feel like work, he played the guitar longer. When a person has lower velocity than the high achiever types, then all you have to do in order to get them to a position of high effectiveness is be more creative in the way you manage or motivate them. Jim found a way to structure his life so that the thing he most loved to do was done almost as if it were play. And today, honest truth, when he comes home from Santa Barbara for a visit, he teaches me guitar technique. Wow. What's your velocity? I believe, folks, that the world is just waiting to give you everything you are ready for. I believe that our greatest, our fastest, and our easiest growth will always come from our natural abilities. You tell your own fortune.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone.
Thomas Merton was a Christian monk who said the thought manifests as the word. The word manifests as the deed. Deeds form into habit, and habit hardens into character. So watch your thoughts with care.